All right, so let's show another very useful tool, especially with the recent ACE3 update. The ACE3 team has rolled out their own Arsenal implementation. Now, if you do run ACE3, you now have two different types of arsenals. You have the BIS Virtual Arsenal, which is the one that we know, and then you have the new ACE3 Arsenal. And you access the BIS Arsenal in a couple of different ways. You used to do it in an init line, but the current way is if you go to object or equipment storage and then you just pick virtual, you can make the whole thing an arsenal by ticking the arsenal box. Or if you're in the virtual tab as opposed to default, if you go to the virtual tab instead, it will make everything that you place in here from the different tabs as part of the virtual inventory that can be accessed in a limited fashion. So that way you're not giving everybody access to all objects. This is a limited arsenal. Some people like to do, you only have so many first aid kits. I tend not to. I usually make a limited arsenal with selected gear that kind of fits a theme. In this case, it's the Gulf War. So that's one way to do it. Another way is to use the ACE arsenal, and you can do something like I just showed you here, where you can not only do the virtual arsenal in a limited fashion, but you can have a function call where you have this, which is specifying your object here, in this it's an equipment box, and then you have an array. In this case, it only has one object in here that has all of the class names in here that you want to include, and then you do a call to the ACE arsenal function init box, which will do it. And this is documented, but some people don't read all the documentation or realize how to implement it. So this is an easy video to show you because it's useful. So that's how you get a limited arsenal for the ACE arsenal system that players can then interact with. Is you make a little array like that, and inside the game it will look like this. So we have an arsenal here, and if we go to the BIS arsenal, you will have the limited gear selection that was available, as well as whatever you're currently carrying, because that's just how the BIS arsenal works. But if you ACE interact, you will see you now have a little arsenal icon, and the only thing that we have in here is, I think, the ACE banana. So that's somewhat interesting. So you can just put whatever class name you feel like into that, and you are able to add those objects. So you can see that I can add things that are there, and I can't add anything that is not in the arsenal. The reason why these ones show up is because this particular unit starts in his respawn inventory some first aid kits, and when you have ACE loaded, it converts the first aid kit to different kinds of bandages, and I think gives you some other medical gear. But you can see that I can add bananas. So that is generally how you make like a limited ACE arsenal. And if you want to put that into practice, what you do is you go to your mission.sqm and go to this area. If you give it a variable name, you can search for it in the SQM file, open it with a text editor like Notepad++, and then you will find a attribute called value, and it will have this entire virtual arsenal statted out in it. And then what you want to do is, in your text editor, you're going to want to remove the square brackets entirely, both the left and the right square brackets. Then you're going to want to search for the double quotes, where you have your double quotes two in a row, and you want to convert those to single double quotes, so that way you're not repeating it. Once you do that, you then look for 2 commas in a row, and then you convert that to a single comma. And then that will give you something that kind of looks like this, which is a giant scary block of text. But this is really just a really big array that has all of the class names separated by comma. You can see the array ends right there. And then it calls the ACE function. And that looks like this. So once you do that, that little change. Arsenal, and then you will find that, wow, you have all of your gear in there that is limited to what is available that you actually allowed. So that's useful. And what's really nice about it is that if you make a loadout, then, if I wanted to save this loadout, which is horrible, then I can just put in a loadout in here. I can save it, and it's only made with the gear that is available inside the mission. And then when I return to the editor, I can go and edit this person's loadout. You can see that I'm in the ACE editor, but I see everything. Then I go to loadout, I go to test, and then I go to default loadouts, and then, or I go to test, load, so that way it's applied to this character. And then I go to default loadouts, and then I give it another name, and then I save it. And that's actually saving it directly into the mission.sqm. You can actually ignore this scripting error. That's because the attribute inside the ACE mission profile for setting the setting for saving the default loadouts doesn't exist yet until you actually save one. So that's okay, and from that point on, you're not going to get that error anymore. So you can save it again. You can save other loadouts, and this one will go away once the mission is loaded again. So that's a useful way to have default loadouts that is available to the player when they spawn. So that way, when a player goes to the Arsenal and goes to Arsenal Interaction, you can see that under Loadouts, Default Loadouts, you have the loadout that the mission maker made. Then that lets you, get your players into a ready, set, go loadout. You can put like an auto rifleman, a rifleman, a AT, JTAG, forward observer, signals, intelligence, mortar team, assaultman, whatever you like in here, with different equipment, different uniforms, that kind of thing. And as long as the gear in that loadout is physically available in the arsenal, it will allow the player to load it. If the gear isn't fully available, only some of it, then some of that gear will not appear. Certain kinds of mods, Operation Trebuchet is an example of that, have some gear that is not visible to ACE Arsenal for whatever reason. Therefore, if you make a nice looking loadout and everything, there's no guarantee that it fully shows up. So other mods, like RHS for example, pretty much everything shows up correctly. So that's how you get your default loadouts sorted out and available for your players, so that way when they're in the mission, they can spawn with nothing originally, quickly go to an arsenal, pick one of your default loadouts, and be ready to hit the road in a matter of minutes, reducing your setup time and getting more on mission, and everybody is thematically appropriate for the mission. If you have a good amount of trust in your players, and not everyone does, then what you can do is globally allow everything in ACE Arsenal entirely, and that you would do this, and then instead of an array, you would put true, and then you would have the whole thing. Doing something like that, I usually like to take away the BIS Arsenal entirely, just because the ACE Arsenal allows the player a bit more flexibility in terms of saving and loading loadouts. It has like a little search bar in the corner, which makes finding things very easy, and it's just overall superior. So kind of forcing players to get in the mood of getting all of this gear set up makes for something relatively nice that you can very quickly, get to the loadout from the spawn, get your gear, and immediately start playing the game without having to spend a lot of time searching for anything. And the search system is quite intuitive. You simply find something that you're searching for, and then you can press enter. You can hit the search tab up here, and it works both ways. And then your sorting obviously works. And if you have a different firearm, locating magazines isn't especially difficult. You can get one, and then there's a tab over here for primary magazine that tells you exactly what magazines are compatible with it. So it's a very nice system, and I think it's an improvement over everything. You can also import text files into the system, and you can also import things that you've saved already in the BIS Arsenal. I found that function to be a little bit buggy, but it can work. You can see that ACE adds this import BI Virtual Arsenal loadouts into ACE Arsenal, but it's not always functional. Not really sure why, but that is the case. So I wanted to kind of go over that as a very quick way to get your players up and running and to encourage the use of ACE Arsenal, and in this particular instance, a limited ACE Arsenal. So to review, you want to go to your mission.sqm file, find your named equipment box. In this case, I called it goodies. And then in the attributes for that box, for that entity, you're going to find an attribute called value. And inside that value, it's going to be a giant class name list. And then once you have that class name list, you need to do 4 things in sequence. You need to remove the square brackets, both left and right. You need to find the portions. You need to remove all of the double quotes that are repeated, so that way there's only one double quote and each one is surrounding a class name. Then you need to find all instances of repeated commas and replace those with single commas, because there's going to be 2 positions inside that that separates the backpacks from the uniforms from the weapons, which are going to have repeated commas, and you need to remove those as well. And you end up, and this is your goal, you're going to end up with a class list that looks like this, that has every class name surrounded by a double quote with a comma, then the next class name, and this entire array is inside this init box here. And the first line is going to be a square bracket, this, comma, and then your array that you edited and put together, with another square box to close the array. And so it's an array inside of an array. And then you call the function ACE Arsenal FNC init box, and then end it with a semicolon, and that will give you your virtual, your limited virtual arsenal using ACE Arsenal. So hopefully that's helpful for you.